Daily at 7 a.m., a poor boy would quietly open the same Bible. One day, a rich boy decided to ask him why. The answer revealed a secret so painful it would change both their lives forever. It was a typical morning in the city. The sun had barely risen over the horizon, and the streets were still mostly empty. In the corner of a forgotten park, a boy in worn clothes and bare feet sat on the same wooden bench cracked by time. He carefully opened an old book. Its pages were yellowed, some even torn, but to him that object was the greatest treasure he owned. It was the Bible his mother had given him, and he never missed a day. At 7 o'clock sharp, he would sit and read in a low voice, as if he had an unmissable appointment with something greater. Across the street, a boy with a completely different life rode by in a luxury car, accompanied by his driver. He was the son of one of the city's wealthiest families, accustomed to a world of parties, mansions, and extravagant trips. Yet for some reason, this ritual caught his attention. Every time the car passed by, he saw the same scene repeat itself, the boy reading his Bible at the same time, without fail. His curiosity began to bother him. Who was this boy? Why did he insist on reading in the same place every day? And most importantly, what was behind this strange routine for someone living on the streets, surrounded by cold and hunger? One day, the rich boy asked his driver to stop the car. He got out, walked to the park, and approached the poor boy. The silence was broken by a simple question that carried an immense weight. Why do you read that book every day, always at the same time? The boy looked up, his eyes shining despite the hardship of his life. Holding the Bible against his chest, he responded with an unexpected calm, because it was the last thing my mother left me. In that instant, the rich boy was speechless. He hadn't expected to hear something so direct, so heavy. The poor boy took a deep breath and continued, as if he needed to share his pain with someone. She gave me this book one morning just like this. She said she was going to get some food and would be right back. She left at 7 o'clock and I never saw her again. Since then, I read at 7 o'clock every day, hoping that somehow she'll come back. A shiver ran down the rich boy's spine. For the first time in his life, he realized there was a kind of pain that money could never fix. The silence that followed the revelation seemed to hang heavy in the air. The rich boy, accustomed to simple, superficial answers, didn't know how to react. He never imagined that such a small gesture could hide so much grief. He sat down next to the poor boy, still trying to process the words he had heard. "Do you really expect her to come back?" he asked, almost without realizing he was intruding on something sacred. The poor boy clutched the Bible to his chest, as if it were a shield against life's uncertainties. His watery eyes reflected not only longing, but also a stubborn hope that time had yet to destroy. "I don't know," he replied softly. "But if I stop believing, that's when I'll truly never see her again." That sentence hit the rich boy's heart like an invisible arrow. He thought of his own mother, who was always there, making breakfast before school, hugging him on cold nights, giving him everything he wanted. It had never crossed his mind that a mother could simply vanish, leaving behind only a book. Suddenly, the noise of luxury cars and the laughter from a nearby bakery seemed to make no sense. The rich boy realized for the first time that there were two different worlds separated by an invisible line, the world of abundance and the world of scarcity. And he, surrounded by everything, had never felt so empty in the face of that boy's faith. Not knowing why, the rich boy returned the next day. The driver found it strange but followed his young boss's request. Again at 7 a.m., there was the poor boy sitting on the same bench with the same open book. The rich boy approached and stood in silence, just watching. The following days were the same. Little by little, the rich boy started bringing bread, fruit, and sometimes even a blanket, hiding them from his family. He didn't want the boy to know, but he spent his nights thinking about that story. How could a mother just disappear? Where could she be? Had she given up on her son? Or was there something deeper and more terrible behind it? With each visit, their unexpected friendship grew. The poor boy shared verses from the Bible, explaining how each word gave him the strength not to give up. And the rich boy, in silence, discovered a kind of wealth that money could never buy. Deep down, without realizing it, a question hammered away in the rich boy's mind. What if the mother's disappearance hid a truth that no one wanted to reveal? The rich boy no longer went just out of curiosity. Now it was as if something pulled him to that forgotten park every morning. The driver didn't understand the boy's persistence and even tried to argue. "You have appointments, classes, you need to rest. Why do you care so much about this boy?" But the rich boy simply answered, "Because I feel like I don't know the whole truth yet." That day, the poor boy was reading a passage aloud in a low voice, his lips trembling as he held the book tight. The rich boy slowly approached and, without realizing it, overheard the boy murmur, "Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me." The words echoed heavily, and the rich boy couldn't hold back his curiosity. He sat down next to him and asked, "You never heard anything about her again? Did no one ever tell you what happened?" The poor boy lowered his eyes and was silent for a few moments. The answer came with a lump in his throat. They said maybe she was taken, that she fell into the hands of bad people. The phrase dropped like a stone between them. The rich boy's eyes widened. Taken, bad people? Who could do that to a mother who only wanted to find food? The poor boy, noticing his shock, continued. Some neighbors said that morning she was seen going into a dangerous street behind the market. Since then, she never came back. I don't know if she's alive, if she left because she wanted to, or if someone prevented her from coming back. I just know that I won't give up waiting." The rich boy swallowed hard. He had never imagined that a mother's disappearance could hide something so dark. He remained silent, but inside a flame of restlessness began to grow. In the following days, the rich boy not only joined his friends' readings, but also started asking discreet questions. He struck up conversations with vendors, old residents of the area, and even passing guards. The answers were always vague, as if there were a cursed secret buried in that part of the city. One merchant even said in a low tone that powerful people were involved in the disappearance of several poor women in the area. A chill ran down the rich boy's spine. Could the boy's mother have been one of those invisible victims? He looked at the poor boy, who remained steadfast in his daily reading, hoping his mother would return at any moment. But now the rich boy no longer saw just faith in that scene. He also saw a dangerous mystery, an open wound that no one wanted to touch, and a decision began to form within him. He wouldn't rest until he found the truth. The rich boy no longer hid from himself how much this friendship was changing the way he saw the world. But inside his luxurious house, the story was very different. One night, sitting at the dinner table, he let it slip during a conversation with his parents. "Dad, Mom, I met a boy in the park. He reads the Bible every day at 7 a.m. His mother disappeared, and I think we need to help him." The silence was immediate. His father, a rigid businessman used to dealing only with people of his own standing, raised his eyebrows and dropped his silverware forcefully onto the table. "You shouldn't get involved with those kinds of people," he said in a dry tone. "It's enough that we make donations to charities. We don't need more problems." His mother tried to soften the blow, but her worried look showed she thought the same. To them, that boy from the streets was just another one among many, someone who didn't deserve the family's attention. The rich boy felt a knot in his chest. For the first time, he disagreed with his parents so intensely. How could they be so cold? Didn't they understand that this boy wasn't just a poor person, but someone with a real story marked by abandonment and mystery? "He isn't a problem," he retorted, his voice firm. "He lost his mother. He has hope that she'll come back. Don't you understand?" His father took a deep breath, trying to stay in control. "You're still very naive. The world doesn't run on faith, it runs on power and money. I don't want you getting involved in this." But the rich boy had already made a silent decision. Nothing would stop him from continuing to be by his new friend's side. The next day he returned to the park. Seeing the poor boy, he felt an immediate relief, as if he had escaped an invisible prison, and sat down beside him. This time he didn't just watch. He opened his own Bible and read aloud the verse on the page, "Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted." The poor boy smiled for the first time in days. That simple act showed him he wasn't alone. But deep down, the rich boy knew the tension at home was just beginning. And the more he got involved in this search for the truth, the more risks he would run. After all, if powerful people were really involved in the mother's disappearance, how far could he go without arousing the anger of those who didn't want the truth to come out? The days went by, and the bond between the two boys only grew. The rich boy, no longer spent just a few minutes there. He would sit next to the poor boy, talk, share food, and even bring clean water in hidden bottles. It was as if he had discovered a truth no one else saw. Behind the misery was someone with faith and dignity. But at home, the situation was about to explode. The father, increasingly irritated, hired someone to discreetly observe his son's movements. It wasn't long before he received confirmation of his suspicions. The heir was indeed spending time with the boy from the street. That night, the father didn't wait for dinner to end. He called his son to his office and, with a stern look, threw some photos taken secretly onto the desk. "Explain this." The boy swallowed hard. The photos showed him sitting on the park bench, smiling next to the poor boy, holding the Bible with him. The rich boy's silence was enough for his father to lose his patience. "I will not allow you to get involved with people like that. You have a name to uphold, responsibilities, an image to protect." The son tried to argue. "He isn't people like that. He's my friend. He lost his mother and no one ever helped him." The father slammed his hand on the table, making the crystal glass tremble. "Friend, you have no idea of the dangers you're running. These people can take advantage of you. They can tarnish our reputation. I forbid you from going back to that park." The words cut like knives. The rich boy left the office with a broken heart, went up to his room, closed the door, and stared at his reflection in the mirror. For the first time, he realized he had to choose, obey his father's voice or listen to his own conscience. The next morning at 7 o'clock, the park bench was empty. The poor boy opened the Bible alone, trying to keep his faith, but he couldn't hide his sadness. Where was his only friend? Meanwhile, on the other side of the city, the rich boy stared out his bedroom window. His father's words still echoed, but something stronger was burning inside him. The certainty that abandoning that boy would be like betraying his own soul. And in that instant, a decision began to form. He wouldn't give up, even if it meant defying his own family. The next day dawned heavily. The rich boy had spent the night awake, stewing over his father's harsh words. But the more he thought, the more he felt that obeying would mean abandoning not only his friend but also himself. When the clock struck 7 a.m., he couldn't bear to stand still. He snuck out without a driver, walking on streets still wet with dew. Each step was a silent challenge against his father's will. Upon reaching the park, his heart sank. The wooden bench was empty. For the first time since he had met him, the poor boy was not there with the Bible open. The rich boy looked around desperate and asked a street vendor who was always on the corner, "The boy who sits here every day. Have you seen him?" The man paused as if hesitant to speak. Then he pointed to a narrow alley behind the park. "I saw some strange men talking to him yesterday. They looked nervous. He didn't show up this morning." A chill ran through the rich boy's blood. The memory of the conversations about bad people roaming that area came back with a vengeance. Had they taken the boy too? He ran to the alley. The walls were damp, covered in graffiti, and the smell of garbage hung in the air. On the ground, he found something that made his heart pound. The Bible, dropped with some pages torn, as if it had been ripped away by force. He picked up the book with trembling hands and felt tears stinging his eyes. This couldn't be a coincidence. Something dark was happening. Suddenly, a rough voice sounded behind him. "You'd better forget about that boy. Kid." The rich boy turned and saw a man leaning against the wall with a menacing look. The stranger stared at him as if he wanted to intimidate him. "This story isn't for you. Go home and pretend you never saw anything." The rich boy backed away, clutching the Bible to his chest, but inside the flame of defiance only grew. How could he simply turn his back, knowing his friend was in danger? He ran back home, but he was no longer the same. As he went through the streets, a thought hammered in his mind. If even that boy's hope could be snatched away, who else could be behind this? And why did so many people seem to know something, but no one had the courage to speak up? When he got to his room, he placed the Bible on the table and swore to himself, "I won't rest until I find the boy, even if it means facing secrets that the city itself seems to want to hide." The rich boy couldn't sleep that night. The image of the Bible on the ground in the alley haunted him like a nightmare. The menacing look of the man who told him to forget everything also stayed in his mind, but he knew that backing down was no longer an option. In the morning, instead of following his private school routine, he made up an excuse and went back to the park. He didn't find his friend, but he decided to talk to anyone willing to speak. First, he went to the popcorn vendor near the bench. He asked about the poor boy in a low voice. The man replied, "Listen, kid, it's not good for you to get involved in this. This area has secrets. His mother, they say she messed with dangerous people. The rich boy's eyes narrowed. Dangerous people, how? The vendor hesitated, looking around, and then whispered, Some say she accidentally got involved with a group that preys on poor women. They promise food, jobs, but then they never come back. The rich boy's stomach churned. The pieces were starting to fit together. His friend's mother hadn't just abandoned her son. Maybe she had fallen into a cruel trap. Determined to go deeper, he walked to the small market on the corner where he remembered hearing that the woman had been seen for the last time. The place smelled of cheap spices and fresh fish. The clerk, an old man with tired eyes, immediately recognized the rich boy and without preamble said, You should go home. This isn't a matter for a child. But the boy didn't give up. He placed the Bible on the counter, opened to a page marked by his friend, and said firmly, I won't leave until I know the truth. The clerk sighed as if carrying an old burden and finally revealed, That morning, I saw her. She was hungry, asking for credit. Then 2 men approached and said they could help her, that there was a place where she could get plenty of food. She believed them and never came back. The rich boy's heart pounded hard. Now he had a concrete lead. There were men involved, men who hunted vulnerable women. But who were they? And why was no one doing anything? He left the market with the Bible under his arm, feeling a mixture of fear and courage. He looked at the empty park and promised himself, I will find my friend and I will find out what they did to his mother. However, he had no idea how much this promise would put his own life at risk. When he returned home late that afternoon, the rich boy entered in silence, trying not to draw attention, but his absence during the day had not gone unnoticed. His father was waiting for him in the living room, arms crossed with a face full of contained anger. Where have you been? He asked, his voice low but menacing. The boy hesitated for a moment. He thought of making up an excuse, but the Bible in his hands betrayed his truth. I was in the park. I was looking for my friend. He disappeared. His father's face turned red. Didn't I make it clear I don't want you involved in this? Don't you understand the danger, or worse, don't you understand the shame you're bringing to this family? His mother, sitting nearby, tried to intervene. Maybe he just wants to help, she ventured, but was interrupted. Help? His father exploded. Helping will destroy us. Those kinds of people don't deserve your attention. And if the police aren't doing anything, it's because there's nothing to be done. You have no idea what you're risking. The rich boy took a deep breath, feeling his heart race. Dad, the friend you call those kinds of people is the only one who showed me what it means to believe. You talk about power and money, but you never talked about hope. He lost his mother and still didn't give up. If I abandon this, I'll never be able to recognize myself in the mirror again. The room fell silent. His father, in disbelief, hadn't expected such boldness. His mother, with a tense look, seemed to have a hidden pride but didn't have the courage to show it. From today on, you are forbidden to leave the house without permission, his father decreed, hitting the arm of the armchair. And if you try, I'll take measures you won't like. The boy went up the stairs with the Bible clutched to his chest, his father's words echoing like invisible chains. But inside, the flame of defiance grew. He felt that the more his father tried to stop him, the stronger his will to continue would be. That night, lying in his soft bed, he looked at the dark ceiling and whispered to himself, I won't give up, even if I have to face all of you. And for the first time, he realized that the battle he was fighting was no longer just for his poor friend or for the missing mother. It was also against the coldness that dominated his own family. The next morning, the rich boy woke up early but didn't go down for breakfast with his family. Instead, he opened his bedroom window and watched the security guards monitoring the house. His father had kept his promise. He wouldn't let him leave without being followed. But the boy wasn't willing to give up. With the agility of someone who had a greater goal than fear, he waited for the right moment and went out the back, climbing a small wall that led to the side street. His heart was pounding, but the Bible hidden under his arm gave him strength. He walked to the park even though he knew he probably wouldn't find his friend. And indeed, the bench was empty. What he did find, however, was a sign that would change everything. On the ground, near the tree where the poor boy used to rest his feet, there was a crumpled piece of paper. He unfolded it carefully and saw something written in shaky letters. If I don't come back, look on the old warehouses street. They took me. The rich boy's legs went weak. This wasn't just any note. It was a plea for help. His friend had left a clear clue, trusting that someone would find it one day. Without a second thought, he put the paper in his pocket and headed toward the address. The old warehouses street was in a part of the city he had never been to. The buildings were abandoned, with broken windows and peeling walls. The silence was unsettling, broken only by the sound of barking dogs in the distance. As he walked, he started to feel that he was being watched. His instinct screamed to turn back, but the memory of his friend pushed him forward. Suddenly, he heard footsteps behind him. He turned and saw a hooded figure disappear into the shadows. His heart pounded. He clutched the Bible to his chest, took a deep breath, and kept walking. The closer he got to the warehouses, the more he felt he was entering forbidden territory. It was then that, through a crack in one of the wooden doors, he saw something that made him freeze. A group of men gathered, speaking in low voices. He couldn't hear everything, but one sentence was clear as a knife. The woman disappeared years ago, but the son still insists on looking. We need to handle this before someone finds out too much. The rich boy backed away slowly, his heart almost exploding. Now he was certain the mother's disappearance wasn't just an accident. There were people hiding the truth, and his friend was at the center of something much bigger and more dangerous than he had imagined. The rich boy's heart was pounding so fast, it seemed to echo through the abandoned warehouse walls. He knew that any false step could be costly, but the memory of his poor friend gave him courage. The note he had found still burned in his pocket, as if it were a silent command not to give up. He approached the ajar door and tried to hear more of the conversation. The male voices were firm, full of authority, as if they were used to giving orders and hiding secrets. "No one can know what happened to that woman," one of them said. "If that boy keeps showing up, it will be a problem." Another responded, laughing cruelly. "He's just a street kid. He'll disappear like his mother soon enough." The words felt like daggers in the rich boy's chest. So it was true. They were directly linked to the disappearance. He needed to get out of there and tell his friend what he had discovered. But as he took a step back, the floorboards creaked under his feet. The sound echoed through the hallway, and the voices inside the warehouse immediately fell silent. "Who's there?" one of the men shouted. The boy held his breath, but it was too late. The door suddenly opened, and a burly man came out looking around. His eyes fixed on the small rich boy who froze in place. "Hey, kid," the man advanced. The rich boy instinctively ran, his heart nearly jumping out of his mouth. The narrow alley made escape difficult, but he squeezed between broken crates and trash bags, trying to lose his pursuer. The sound of heavy boots hitting the ground multiplied his fear. He turned a corner and found a rusted iron ladder that led to the roof of one of the sheds. He climbed in a hurry, his hands trembling, his knees scraping against the metal. He reached the top, out of breath, but had no time to rest. The man was already at the base of the ladder, climbing after him. With no way out, the rich boy ran across the roof, feeling the old tiles crack under his feet. One false step and he could fall. The cold wind hit his face, mixed with the metallic taste of fear. Suddenly he found an opening, a broken skylight that led into the shed. Without thinking, he threw himself through it, landing on a pile of fabric sacks. The pain was sharp, but he was alive. In the dark of the warehouse, he hid behind a stack of crates, trying to control his breathing. From outside, he heard the man shout, "If I catch that kid, he'll never open his mouth again." The rich boy clutched the Bible to his chest, sweating cold. Now he was certain. He was messing with something much bigger and more dangerous than he had imagined. But at the same time, something inside him screamed that backing down was no longer possible. The rich boy remained hidden behind the crates for several minutes, his whole body trembling. The sound of heavy boots echoed outside, but little by little the footsteps faded away. He waited until silence took over the warehouse, and finally gathered the courage to come out of his hiding place. Carefully he found a small ajar side door and escaped to a deserted street. His heart was still pounding. His breath was short, but he knew he had to keep going. His friend's note was his only clue, and giving up was not an option. Following through narrow alleys, he heard a weak, almost imperceptible sound, a cough. He approached slowly, and turning the corner, he saw him, the poor boy huddled behind a wooden crate, hugging the Bible as if it were his only protection. The rich boy ran to him and knelt, relieved. "I looked for you everywhere. Are you okay?" The poor boy looked up but didn't answer. His face was pale, and the fear stamped on his expression said more than any word. He was trembling as if he had seen something impossible to describe. "What happened?" the rich boy insisted, trying to touch his shoulder. The poor boy just shook his head as if begging not to be pressured. He clutched the Bible to his chest and whispered almost inaudibly, "I can't talk. If I tell you, they'll find me too." A shiver ran down the rich boy's spine. Who were they? What had the boy seen? He tried to calm him down. "You're not alone. I'm here, but I need to understand what they did to your mother." Tears ran down the poor boy's dirty face. He took a deep breath and whispered, I heard them talking. My mother didn't leave because she wanted to. She was taken." His voice failed. The crying took over. "Maybe she'll never come back." The rich boy closed his eyes for an instant, feeling the weight of the revelation. The suspicion that had tormented him was now almost a certainty. There was something cruel behind that story, something that involved people willing to do anything to maintain silence. He held his friend's hands firmly. "Then let's find out together. I promise." The poor boy didn't answer, just rested his forehead against the Bible, letting the tears soak the old pages. The rich boy in turn knew he was entering a point of no return. If before it was just curiosity, now it was a mission. Find the truth no matter the cost. And deep down, he felt that the next step could put them in even greater danger. The two boys sat side by side in the alley for long minutes, in silence. The rich boy watched his poor friend hug the Bible as if it were the only thing keeping him standing. The air was heavy, but a certainty was growing inside him. That story hid much more than they seemed willing to reveal. "Let me see your Bible," the rich boy asked carefully. The poor boy hesitated, clutching the book to his chest. Then, as if he had gathered strength, he handed it over. The rich boy opened the worn pages with delicacy. The letters were faded, the margins marked with small handwritten notes, perhaps by the mother herself. He ran his fingers over the pages when he noticed something different. At the back of the cover, hidden under the binding stitching, was a folded piece of paper. "Did you know about this?" he asked, surprised. The poor boy's eyes widened and he shook his head. "No, I never saw it." With trembling hands, the rich boy pulled out the paper. It was a thin sheet, yellowed by time, written in a hurried, almost frantic handwriting. The first words made both their hearts pound. "If one day I don't come back, go to the quarry street. Someone there might tell you the truth. Don't trust strangers." The silence between them was broken only by the distant sound of passing cars. The poor boy put his hand to his mouth in disbelief. "It's from my mother. She knew something could happen." The rich boy clenched his fists, feeling a mixture of fear and determination. Now he had a concrete clue left by the woman herself before she disappeared. It wasn't just a guess. There was someone somewhere who knew the truth. "Then that's where we're going," he said firmly. The poor boy looked around, fearful. "But what if it's dangerous? What if it's a trap?" The rich boy took a deep breath. "If your mother left this message, it's because she believed you would find it one day. We can't ignore it." The poor boy's eyes welled up again, but this time not with despair, but with hope. It was as if that clue reignited the flame inside him that the bad men had tried to extinguish. Holding the Bible and the note as if they were relics, the two stood up. The quarry street was a mystery, but also a promise. And for the first time, they weren't alone in the search. The rich boy looked at the sky, which was beginning to darken with heavy clouds. Deep down, he felt that the path they were about to take could change their lives, but it could also reveal secrets that many would prefer to keep buried forever. Night was falling when the two boys decided to follow the clue left in the note. The quarry street was in a forgotten part of the city, a neighborhood marked by abandoned houses and rusted sheds. The streetlights flickered, and the silence was broken only by the distant sound of barking dogs. The rich boy walked ahead, holding the Bible as if it were a map. The poor boy, still suspicious, looked all around, afraid that someone was following them. "Are you sure about this?" he asked, his voice trembling. "What if it's too dangerous?" "We can't turn back now," the rich boy replied. "Your mother believed this place held answers." They finally reached a small wooden house, almost in ruins, with the door ajar. Inside, a weak light flickered, probably from a candle. The two looked at each other, undecided, but before they could muster the courage to enter, a hoarse voice called from the darkness. "You're looking for someone, aren't you?" The boys turned, startled. An elderly man with a grey beard and simple clothes was standing on the sidewalk, leaning on a cane. His eyes, however, shone with a strange intensity, as if they knew more than he was letting on. "Who are you, sir?" the rich boy asked, trying to hide his fear. The old man sighed. "You don't know me, but I knew his mother," he said, pointing to the poor boy. "I warned her not to trust the men who roamed the market, but she was hungry, desperate, and fell into the trap." The poor boy's legs went weak. "You saw her. Do you know where they took her?" The man looked around, making sure no one else was listening. Then, in a low voice, he revealed, she wasn't the only one. Many women disappeared the same way, always with promises of food, easy work, and they never came back. The truth is, there's a network hidden in the city's shadows that preys on the most vulnerable. The rich boy clutched the Bible to his chest. "And where is she now?" "Is my mother alive?" the poor boy asked in desperation. The old man hesitated, as if the words were too heavy. "I can't be sure, but I know one thing. The old warehouses aren't just abandoned depots. There's a place there where they hide secrets no one dares to reveal." Silence took over the street. The cold wind rattled the loose boards of the house, as if the environment itself confirmed the danger of those words. Before walking away, the old man left a warning. "If you go after the truth, be prepared, because those who mess with them might never come back." The two boys looked at each other. The fear was immense, but at the same time, hope had never been so strong. The conversation with the old man left the two boys in silence for a few moments. The rich boy held the Bible and the note hidden between the pages tightly. The poor boy, in turn, was trembling with fear, but his eyes shone with a mixture of pain and hope. "He said it's too dangerous," the poor boy murmured. "What if he's right, and what if we never come back?" The rich boy took a deep breath and put his hand on his friend's shoulder. "Your mother believed that you would find this note one day. She trusted that you would have courage. We can't stop now." The poor boy closed his eyes as if seeking strength in a silent prayer and finally nodded. Then together, they followed the quarry street to the old warehouses. The place seemed even scarier at night. Broken windows reflected the moonlight, rusted doors creaked in the wind, and a silence seemed to watch their every step. They hid behind a pile of crates when they heard voices. Two men were coming out of one of the sheds, talking in low tones. "The problem is that boy," one of them said. "He won't stop showing up. We already handled his mother. Can we handle him too?" the other replied. The two boys looked at each other, their hearts pounding. The confirmation they feared was before them. The mother had really been taken by those men. When the footsteps disappeared into the darkness, the rich boy pulled his friend by the arm and crept to the shed's ajar door. He pushed it open carefully, making only a slight creak. The interior was shrouded in gloom, lit by a few weak lamps hanging from the ceiling. It was then that they saw something that made them freeze. There were stacked boxes with documents, notebooks, and even photographs scattered on a table. The rich boy approached and picked up one of the photos with trembling hands. It was the poor boy's mother. The portrait was crumpled as if it had been stored in a hurry. "It's her," the poor boy whispered, tears streaming down his face. The rich boy continued to rummage through the papers and found a list with several female names, all crossed out with dates next to them. Among them, the boy's mother's name was marked. "They registered everything," he said, his voice choked. Suddenly, a sound of footsteps echoed inside the shed. Someone was coming back. The boys looked at each other, their hearts pounding. They no longer had time to think. The rich boy grabbed the photo and the paper with the names, stuffing them inside the Bible, while the poor boy pulled his hand in desperation. They had to get out of there before they were discovered. With a racing heart and held breath, they ran along the side of the shed, hearing the voices getting closer. The escape was risky, but now they didn't just carry faith and hope. They carried proof that the mother had really been taken. The two boys' hearts felt like they were exploding in their chests. They ran through the dark corridors of the shed, trying to find an exit before the men noticed their presence. The voices echoed, mixed with the heavy sound of boots hitting the ground. "They're here!" someone shouted. The poor boy grabbed his friend's hand, and together they went through a side door that led to the back of the warehouse. The night was cold, and the strong wind made metal sheets bang against each other, as if warning that there was no easy escape. The rich boy held the Bible tightly against his chest, with the evidence, the mother's photo, and the list of names inside. Every step was riskier, But giving up was no longer part of their reality. Suddenly, a bright light illuminated the alley. One of the men had appeared with a flashlight and a piece of iron in his hands. "Run!" the rich boy shouted. They sprinted down the quarry street, the poor boy's bare feet scraping on the rough ground, while the rich boy stumbled in his expensive shoes but didn't stop. Behind them, shouts echoed, "Get those kids, they can't leave here." The sound of the boots got closer. The breathless poor boy pointed to a rusted gate that led to a vacant lot. "This way." With effort, they pushed the gate until it opened wide enough and squeezed inside. The rich boy felt the metal tear his shirt, but he didn't care. On the other side, they ran through tall grass and broken concrete, trying to lose their pursuers. But the men were fast. The flashlight swept the ground, revealing shadows running after them. The poor boy stumbled on a piece of wood and almost fell, but his friend held him in time. "Don't stop!" The rich boy insisted, pulling him. The flashlights were getting closer. It was a matter of seconds until they were caught. It was then that the rich boy saw an exit, a partially open manhole large enough for them to fit. "There!" he pointed. The two crawled to the hole and, without thinking, went down into the damp darkness. The smell was unbearable, but at least they were out of sight. From inside, they heard the men shouting furiously. They disappeared. Search every corner. The rich boy breathed with difficulty but held the Bible tightly, as if it were his own life. The poor boy was trembling, but in his eyes there was something new, not just fear, but also the certainty that they weren't running in vain. Now they had the proof, now they had the truth, but the risk was greater than ever, and they knew the men wouldn't rest until they found them. The silence inside the manhole was suffocating. The damp air mixed with the smell of rust and dirt made breathing difficult. The rich boy held the Bible so tightly that his fingers hurt. The poor boy huddled next to him was trembling non-stop. "They won't give up," the poor boy whispered, his voice almost swallowed by the echo. "Now they know we found out." The rich boy nodded, feeling the weight of the words. He was aware that they couldn't resist on their own for long. They needed help. But from whom? When they managed to get out of the manhole through an opening in another street, it was already dawn. The city was asleep, except for the street dogs rummaging through garbage bags. The boys walked tired, their feet sore, their hearts still on alert at every distant sound. "What if we go to the police?" The rich boy risked. The poor boy interrupted him with a desperate look. "No, they might be involved too. My mother always said to be suspicious. If she left a hidden note, it's because she knew she couldn't trust just anyone." The rich boy thought of his father, who would certainly never believe the story. He thought of the mansion's employees, always obedient to their boss's orders. None of them seemed like a safe option. "Then who?" he asked, frustrated. The poor boy was silent for a few moments. Then he murmured, "Maybe the old man from the quarry street. He knew things. He risked telling us. Maybe he can help us more." The rich boy reflected. Trusting someone meant giving up the security they still had, but at the same time, without support, they would be completely alone. As they walked, they passed a simple church, with its doors open even at night. The sound of a bell echoed softly. The two stopped almost instinctively. Inside, the light of candles illuminated a simple altar, and the silence seemed welcoming. "We're safe here for now," the rich boy said. They entered and sat on the wooden benches. The poor boy rested the Bible on his knees and opened it at random. His eyes fell on a verse that seemed to speak directly to them. "The truth will set you free." The two looked at each other. They didn't know if it was a coincidence or a sign, but it reinforced their conviction that they were on the right path. The rich boy clenched his fists. "We need someone to fight with us, but we need to choose carefully." The poor boy just nodded, wiping away his tears. The dilemma was clear. Seeking help could save their lives or hand them directly into the hands of those who wanted to destroy them. The sunrise brought with it a thick fog, as if the city wanted to hide the secrets it held. The two boys, exhausted, decided they couldn't waste time. The mother's note pointed to the quarry street, and the old man they had found there seemed to be the only person willing to speak the truth. "He might know more than he said yesterday," the rich boy stated, his voice firm despite the fear. "He risked warning us. Maybe he's waiting for us to come back." The poor boy nodded, hugging the Bible as if it were his compass. They walked through the deserted streets until they reached the abandoned neighborhood. The floorboards creaked under their feet, and the wind rattled loose doors. The place seemed even darker than the night before. As they approached the wooden house, they noticed something strange. The door was open, wide ajar, and on the ground there were marks of hurried footsteps. The rich boy raised his hand for his friend to stop. "Something happened here," he whispered. They entered cautiously. The inside of the house was a mess, with fallen chairs and scattered papers. The smell of an extinguished candle still filled the air, but the old man wasn't there. Suddenly they heard voices coming from outside. They ran to a crack in the window and saw two men in dark suits circling the house, talking in low tones. "He knows too much," one of them said. "If he opens his mouth, he can ruin everything." The poor boy covered his mouth with his hand to contain a sob. The rich boy pulled him back, his heart racing. The old man was in danger. And worse, they weren't the only ones who had come after him. Minutes later, the men walked away, but they left behind a suffocating feeling. The boys knew they were being watched, maybe even followed. It was then that the rich boy found a detail on the floor, a folded piece of paper lying near the table. He quickly picked it up and opened it. It was a handwritten note, probably by the old man himself. "If I'm not here, look for Donna Isabel in the port village. She knows the truth." The poor boy's eyes widened. Another clue, another hope, but also more risk. If those men were already after the old man, it wouldn't take long for them to find out that someone else had information. The rich boy closed the note and looked at his friend. "We have to go now before they get to her." The poor boy nodded, although his body was trembling. They both knew. Every clue they found brought them closer to the truth, but also put them one step closer to mortal danger. The walk to the port village was long and exhausting. The rich boy, accustomed to luxury cars and paved roads, felt his body tire with every step. The poor boy, even used to the streets, also seemed exhausted, but neither of them thought of giving up. The Bible and the note guided them as if they were a lighthouse in the middle of the darkness. The port village was near the river, where rusted boats were tied to old piers. The smell of fish mixed with brine filled the air. The houses were simple, made of wood, many painted with colors already faded by time and sea air. "Who is this Donna Isabel?" the rich boy asked, looking around. The poor boy kept his eyes alert, his heart pounding. If the old man trusted her, she must be someone who knew my mother. After a few discreet questions to the residents, they arrived at a small blue house with low doors. They knocked carefully and the door opened slowly. An elderly woman with white hair tied in a simple bun appeared. Her look, despite the wrinkles, was firm and attentive. "Are you the boys?" she asked before they could even say a word. The two looked at each other, surprised. "The old man told me you might come," she continued. "Come in quickly." The room was small, lit only by a lantern. Old paintings adorned the walls, and on the table there were papers, photos, and newspaper clippings. Donna Isabel sat down and stared at the boys with seriousness. "I knew your mother," she said, looking directly at the poor boy. "She was a strong woman, but she was desperate that morning. She had nothing to give you, and believed the false promises she heard. I tried to warn her, but it was too late." The poor boy clutched the Bible tightly, tears streaming down his face. "What happened to her? Where is she?" Donna Isabel took a deep breath, as if she needed courage to speak. "Your mother was taken to a hidden place, a group that takes advantage of hunger and misery. They don't just deceive women. They control a lot of things in this city." The rich boy's stomach churned. "Who are they?" The old woman looked down, nervously fidgeting with her hands. Then she looked up and said in a grave voice, "They have connections with powerful people, businessmen, politicians, people who seem respectable. That's why no one talks. That's why disappearances like your mother's are treated as if they never happened." Silence weighed in the room. The two boys looked at each other, shocked. The boy's mother wasn't just a lost victim, but part of something much bigger and darker. Donna Isabel then pulled out a drawer and handed them a yellowed photograph. In it, several women appeared in a shed, and among them was the poor boy's mother. This photo was taken shortly after she disappeared. There's proof that she was still alive. The poor boy put his hands to his mouth, moved. For the first time, he had a real sign that his mother could be somewhere, waiting for him. The silence after Donna Isabel's revelation seemed to crush the air inside the small room. The poor boy couldn't stop staring at the photograph, his hands trembling. There she was, his mother, alive, although with a tired and lost look. It was proof that everything he had heard until then was not just a rumor or childish hope. "Where is she now?" he asked, his voice choked. "Do you know?" Donna Isabel lowered her eyes. "I can't say for sure. This photo is from years ago. What I do know is that the group kept her in different places, always moving. It wasn't just her. Many others were also taken." The rich boy leaned forward, his heart beating faster. "Who leads this group? Who has enough power to make so many people disappear without anyone doing anything?" The old woman hesitated. Her eyes scanned the room as if she feared someone might be listening. Then she whispered, "They don't act alone. They have cover. Businessmen who support the sheds, politicians who turn a blind eye." And she paused, looking at the rich boy. "Even respected families from high society are involved." The words fell like stones. The rich boy's blood ran cold. High society families. Donna Isabel nodded slowly. "Yes, those with a lot of money tend to think they can buy silence." The poor boy's eyes widened and he turned to his friend. What if your family is in the middle of this?" The rich boy froze. A memory came to mind, his father, saying firmly that he didn't want him to get involved, saying that these things were not for him. Suddenly those words took on another weight. Could it be possible that his own father knew the truth? The old woman continued, her voice grave. "I've heard names whispered in the shadows. One of them is a well-known man, someone who always presents himself as a benefactor of the city, but who in fact profits from the pain of others." The rich boy didn't need to hear more. He felt his body tremble. His intuition confirmed what he feared. His own father was closer to this story than he wanted to believe. The poor boy noticed his friend's expression and whispered, "Do you think?" The rich boy clenched his fists. "If this is true, my own family might be hiding what happened to your mother." Silence again dominated the environment, but this time it wasn't just fear. It was also anger, indignation, and the feeling that the truth was about to explode like a bomb inside their lives. Donna Isabel put her hand on the table and said, "If you want to continue, you need to have courage, because facing the truth can be more painful than living in doubt." The walk home was the most difficult of the rich boy's life. He walked in silence, the Bible glued to his chest, while his mind spun in a whirlwind. Donna Isabel's words echoed like hammers. High society families are involved. As he crossed the mansion's gates, he felt that every familiar detail now seemed suspicious. The impeccable walls, the expensive paintings, the silent employees, everything hid a weight he had never noticed before. During dinner, he observed his father with different eyes. The elegant man, with a firm voice and imposing posture, seemed so sure of himself that it was almost impossible to imagine he held secrets. But in every gesture, the rich boy now saw signs. The suspicious look when his son was late, the rigidity when the topic of the park came up, the haste to change the subject. "You're too quiet today," his mother commented, trying to sound light. The rich boy took a deep breath and, without thinking much, let it slip. "Today I was with someone who knew my friend's mother." His father's utensil stopped in mid-air for a second. It was quick, but enough for the boy to notice. A cold, almost imperceptible look appeared in the man's eyes before he resumed his movement and responded with a firm voice. "I already told you not to get involved in this matter." Silence spread across the table. The boy's heart raced. What if your family is hiding something? He risked, his voice trembling but full of courage. His mother stared at him, shocked. His father put his utensils down calmly, but his look was now one of pure threat. "Be careful what you say, boy. There are things you don't understand." The rich boy felt his body go cold, but he also realized that reaction was more than a simple warning. It was a sign that something was being hidden. That night, locked in his room, he opened the Bible and looked at the photo of his friend's mother. Her face seemed to plead for him not to give up. The note, the evidence, his father's look, everything pointed to a painful truth. His own family was somehow linked to the disappearance. Tears fell silently, but they were soon replaced by a flame of determination. If his father was involved, he couldn't back down. He needed to face not only the men from the warehouses, but also the power that ran within his own home. And deep down, he knew the next confrontation could change his life forever. That night, the mansion's silence seemed heavier than ever. The rich boy couldn't eat at dinner. He felt that every look from his father carried more than authority. It hid the fear and anger of someone who had something to lose. After the employees left, the boy mustered his courage, placed the Bible on the table, opened it to the page where he had kept the photo and the list of names, and looked directly at his father. "I know what you're hiding." The man slowly raised his eyes, and a deadly silence took over the room. "What are you talking about?" His voice sounded cold, calculated. The rich boy took a deep breath. "My friend's mother, the list of missing women, the old warehouses." The father's expression changed slightly, but it was enough. The look that wavered for a moment confirmed that those words had hit home. "Where did you get that?" The man asked, his voice lower but filled with menace. "That doesn't matter. What matters is that you knew. You knew these things were happening and you did nothing?" The father slowly stood up, his shadow projected over the table. "I warned you not to get involved. You have no idea who you're facing." The boy clenched his fists. "Yes, I do. I'm facing you." His mother, who had been sitting in silence until then, put her hand to her mouth, frightened. Her eyes filled with tears, as if she also carried untold secrets. "Son," she murmured, but didn't have the courage to continue. The rich boy stared back at his father, feeling his heart pound. For the first time, he didn't just see the imposing figure of the man who commanded business and decisions. He saw an accomplice, a direct link to the suffering of so many families. "What did you do to my friend's mother?" The boy's voice came out trembling but firm. The father's eyes narrowed. "Be careful with your words, boy. This truth can destroy more than you imagine." And in that instant, the boy realized. The fight was not just to reveal what happened to his friend's mother. It was also to face the darkness that was inside his own house. The silence after the father's words seemed to cut the air in the room. The poor boy, with tears streaming down his face, clutched the Bible to his chest, while the rich boy kept his eyes fixed on the man who was supposed to be a role model, but was showing himself to be an accomplice to silence. "You won't understand," the father murmured, sitting down, his voice filled with weariness. "This network is bigger than all of us. It's not just about dirty business. It's an entire system." The rich boy slammed his hand on the table, making the mother's photo slide. "Then just tell me, where is she?" The man closed his eyes for a few seconds, as if fighting with himself. Finally, he sighed and revealed, "There's a hidden shed near the port used as a front for a fishing warehouse. That's where they take the women who haven't been taken far away yet. If your mother is still alive, that's where she might be." The poor boy's heart raced. "Then there's still a chance?" The father didn't answer directly, just averted his gaze, which was enough to reignite a flame of hope. The rich boy's mother, in tears, stood up and held her son's hand. "Don't go, it's too dangerous. They'll kill you." But the boy looked at her with firmness. "If I don't go, I'll be dead inside." That same night, the two boys prepared in silence. The poor boy only took the Bible and his mother's photograph. The rich boy kept the note with the names and a small flashlight he took from the mansion. Before leaving, he looked at his father one last time. "If she's still there, I'll bring her back and nothing you say will stop me." The man remained silent, but in the depths of his eyes, there was something the son had never seen: guilt. The boys left the mansion through the back door, crossing the pre-dawn hours toward the port. Every step seemed guided by something greater than them. The poor boy's faith, the rich boy's determination, two different forces now united in the same purpose. The sea wind carried the smell of salt and rust. As they approached the fishing warehouses, they could see weak lights on the horizon. The rich boy's heart raced. It was there that the truth would finally be revealed. The port village was steeped in silence, broken only by the sound of waves crashing against the rusted boats. The two boys crept through the shadows, each step filled with fear and hope. The warehouse indicated by the rich boy's father was before them. A dark wooden building with high windows, lit by weak lamps that seemed to be watching the night. "It's here," the poor boy murmured, clutching the Bible to his chest. The rich boy nodded, trying to control his racing heart. They found a side opening between the broken boards and entered. The smell of fish and mold was suffocating. Inside, the scene was somber, with stacked boxes, fishing nets, and in the back a narrow corridor leading to an iron door. Suddenly they heard voices. Two men were talking near the door. "We have to transfer the women tomorrow morning. The sooner the better." The poor boy held his breath, feeling his legs tremble. The rich boy pulled him behind a crate, The two stood still as the voices echoed. When the footsteps faded, they breathed a sigh of relief and decided to advance. They reached the iron door and pushed it open carefully. On the other side, there was a large, dimly lit space where some women were sitting on the floor, beaten down but alive. The poor boy's eyes widened, his heart pounding. He desperately looked for a familiar face. "Mom," he murmured, almost without a voice. One of the women slowly raised her head. Her eyes, tired but still full of life, met his. Tears ran down her face as she whispered, "My son." The poor boy ran to her, hugging her with all the strength he had. The Bible fell to the ground, but it didn't matter now. He finally had her back in his arms. The rich boy moved, tried to hold back his tears, but there was no time to celebrate. Outside, heavy footsteps were approaching. One of the men had noticed the open door. "We have to get out now," the rich boy said, helping the mother stand up. But before they could escape, the door burst open. 3 men entered, with flashlights and pieces of iron in their hands. "I knew those kids would show up again," one of them shouted. The rich boy looked at his friend, then at his mother. His heart was pounding so hard it seemed about to explode. There was no choice. They would have to run for their lives. He picked up the Bible from the floor and with a quick gesture made room, pushing a pile of boxes. The noise attracted the men, but it gave them precious seconds for the 3 to run down the narrow corridor toward the side exit. The shouts of fury echoed behind them. The rescue had worked, but the escape would be the most dangerous part. The sound of flashlights and shouts echoed closer and closer. The 3 ran across the soft sand, but the mother, tired and weakened by years of suffering, stumbled with every step. The poor boy supported her with all his strength, while the rich boy desperately looked for an exit. Behind them, the men's shadows got closer. Their firm footsteps marked the ground. "They're going to catch us," the poor boy shouted, his voice choked with fear. The rich boy looked around, his heart pounding. It was then that he spotted a small, half-abandoned boat tied with ropes to the pier. "Quick! This way," he pointed. The 3 ran toward the boat, but one of the men saw them and shouted, "They're over there." The flashlights all turned toward them, illuminating their escape as if it were day. The rich boy pulled the boat's rope with force, trying to untie it, but it was caught in a tight knot. The desperate poor boy began hitting the rope with a rock, while the mother pleaded, "Go without me, they're going to get you." "Never." The son shouted, tears streaming down his face. "I've waited all these years to have you back. I won't lose you again." The rich boy managed to untie part of the rope, but the footsteps were already echoing heavily behind them. One of the men was so close he could almost grab the mother. On impulse, the rich boy raised the Bible and used it to hit the attacker's flashlight, knocking it to the ground and putting out the light. "Now!" he shouted. The poor boy managed to untie the last knot, and together they pushed the boat into the water. The mother got in first, then the 2 boys. With their hands, they began to row in an improvised way, while the men ran to the edge of the pier, shouting and throwing rocks. With every meter they moved away. Their hearts seemed to return to their chests, but they were not yet safe. The sea was dark, choppy, and they didn't know if they would be able to reach the other side. The poor boy hugged his mother tightly, crying with relief and fear at the same time. The rich boy, with his arms tired from rowing, looked back. The men were still on the edge, shouting and promising revenge, but at that moment, seeing the distance increase, he realized that they had managed to escape. They weren't completely safe yet, but for the first time there was real hope. The boat reached the sand of the small cove as the sun began to rise. The 3 staggered out, exhausted but alive. The mother could barely stand, and the poor boy supported her with great care while tears of relief streamed down his face. "I knew you would come back," he murmured, his voice choked. "Every day at 7 o'clock I read the Bible waiting for this." She hugged him tightly, crying too. It was that faith that kept us together, even from a distance. The rich boy watched the scene with teary eyes, but inside an emptiness ached. In their escape, he had left the Bible behind in the shed. That book, which was his friend's symbol of hope, was now lost. "The Bible," he murmured, his voice heavy with guilt. The poor boy looked up, still with tears, but smiled in a fragile and courageous way. "It doesn't matter. It served its purpose." "What was written here?" He pointed to his heart. "No one can take that away." A shiver ran down the rich boy's spine. For the first time, he understood that his friend's faith was not just in an object, but within him. Later, they found shelter in a small church by the road. The priest, surprised to see their state, opened the doors and gave them bread, water, and a corner to rest. The mother, lying on a wooden bench, closed her eyes with the peace of someone who was finally free. Meanwhile, the rich boy sat next to the poor boy. "I failed you. I left the Bible behind," he said, but the poor boy held his hand firmly. "You didn't fail. You brought my mother back. That was the greatest proof of faith I've ever seen." The silence inside the church seemed to confirm those words. The sunrise light shone through the simple stained glass windows, illuminating the three of them. It was as if heaven was saying, "You won because you believed." The rich boy knew there were still risks, that the network was still active, and that his father would have to face the consequences. But looking at his friend and his mother, he understood that the most important thing had already been won. Hope had survived, even when all seemed lost. The sun was already illuminating the small church when the rich boy decided they couldn't stay hidden forever. The escape was over, but the network was still free, and the men who had shouted behind them could appear at any moment. His heart begged for rest, but reason told him they would only be truly safe if someone acted against it. It was then that the priest approached. He had heard part of the conversation, and seeing the state of the rescued mother, had no doubts. He picked up the old telephone in the sacristy and called the police directly. "It's time for the truth to come out," he said, looking at the boys with firmness. "You don't have to carry this burden alone." The poor boy, still hugging his mother, widened his eyes. "But what if they don't believe us? What if they're on the side of the bad men?" The priest squeezed the boy's shoulder calmly. "Not everyone can be bought. There are honest people willing to fight." Minutes later, the sound of sirens echoed through the village. Police cars parked in front of the church, and several armed agents got out quickly. The rich boy stood up, holding the list of names and the mother's photo tightly, the evidence he had kept with so much care. "Here it is," he said, handing it to the police chief. "They're keeping women locked up in the port warehouses. We saw it with our own eyes." The police officers looked at each other, shocked but didn't hesitate. An operation was immediately organized, and police cars headed toward the sheds. The boys' hearts pounded as they heard the confirmations over the radio. "Location found. Victims rescued, suspects arrested." The poor boy fell to his knees, crying with relief. For the first time, he felt that the nightmare was truly ending. His mother hugged him tightly, her tears mixing with his. "It's over, my son, now we're free." The rich boy was also crying, but in a different way. He realized that they could finally live without constant fear. No man would ever chase them again. In the late morning, when everything seemed calmer, the police chief returned to the church and approached the boys. "You were brave. Thanks to you, many people were saved." The poor boy wiped his eyes and replied, his voice firm despite the tears. "It wasn't just courage. It was hope." The rich boy nodded, looking at his friend. "And it was friendship." The priest smiled proudly. "And it was faith." Outside, the sky was clear, and the sun illuminated every detail of the village. There were no longer shouts, no chases, no fear, just a new beginning. The two boys walked together with the mother beside them, feeling for the first time that they were truly safe. The rich boy knew he would still have to face his father, and that the world of the rich would try to cover up the scandal, but none of that mattered. They had won. And in each of their hearts, one certainty echoed. No matter how dark the night, hope always dawns. If you like this story, then like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next videos.